Welcome back to another episode of Afro Soul Stories. This afternoon, we have a very special guest from both Trinidad and Canada. He is an author and a musician and a presenter as well. Ladies and gentlemen, his name is Antonio Michael Downing. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Hey, it's beautiful to be here. Thanks for having me, Siwa.
Thank you so much, man. I have been really enjoying your musical work and really very much been enjoying reading about your multifaceted career in both literature and music. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your recent project, Black Cherokee. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a strange life. I blame my grandmother because when I was a kid, she gave me two great gifts, lots of gifts, but two big ones were she was always singing. So I learned how to sing from watching her sing, when she wakes up, when she goes to bed, happy,
Hmm.
sad, she had a song for everything. And her eyes were bad, but she still liked to read her King James Bible. So
Yeah.
she taught me how to read so I could be her eyes. And so
Fantastic.
to this day, music and storytelling well, it's all storytelling, but music and writing are the things. And in Black Cherokee, it's a coming of age story. It's a novel. And it's about a young girl and her grandmother sort of growing up and she's both black and Cherokee,
Mm.
which there's a strange little history story in America that people don't know, even in America, where uh the elite in some of the big tribes, like the Cherokee, owned slaves.
Hmm.
Um, but then when those slaves were emancipated, they were culturally part of the tribe, but racially black, and
Yeah.
this creates a friction that exists to this day. So Black Cherokee is about a young girl, Ophelia Blue Rivers, born into this tradition,
Hmm.
and basically both sides reject her. You know,
Wow.
the black folks are like, "Why are you praying to the river?"
Mm.
and and the Cherokee folks are like, "Why is your hair so curly?" And
Mm.
so as a young girl, she's rejected from both these traditions, these communities she belongs to, and she has to figure out how she should be. And that's what
Yeah.
the story of Black Cherokee is.
Wow. I mean, I know from doing a little bit of research into your previous work from Saga Boy, which was more of an autobiographical piece. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
How did you segue into both fiction, but also into writing a piece from a female perspective and from the perspective of the southern states of America?
Yeah, well, I always say it's like asking a writer, how did you end up with this thing? What were your clear intentions, and tell us how it unfolded exactly as you planned it. It's a bit like asking a person, why did you fall in love with that person? Because we always have great reasons why we fell in love with them. They're good family, good manners, good job. But really, we all know that falling in love is an instantaneous,
Mm,
overwhelming of feeling, right?
mhm.
So
Yeah.
for me, I was traveling in the US quite a bit, and I got almost like a mysterious visitation of this
Mm,
picture of this rural place. It's a bend in the river, it's a cabin in the woods, and there's a grandmother and her little granddaughter.
mm.
And I knew they were Afro-Indigenous, but it was almost like a mystery that came to me, and writing the book was sort of my way of solving the mystery.
Wow, that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, so that's kind of how my process works with it. And so I wanted to write fiction because I see myself as a fiction writer. I think I just happened to write Saga Boy. Saga Boy happened to be the first major work I published.
Yeah.
And it was memoir, but I never saw myself as that kind of writer. I love history, I love biography, I love the idea of how history is supposed to be in the past, but it's living and present all the time. It never ever dies. right?
Yeah.
It kind of shapes our lives. And just that's where I happen to be. I was traveling in the South a lot, like all the southern
Yeah.
states, and the landscape infected me, the people. It just shocked me how much the people lived with old history every
Mm.
day, but they didn't think anything of it. But as an
Yeah.
outsider, I looked at it and I could say, man, how do you guys have a plaque celebrating the people who fought for slavery while the descendants of the slaves are 50% of the city? You
Mm.
know, like
Yeah.
things like that would hit me and I would be like, this is really strange. And and
Yeah.
so that kind of captured my imagination, and that's where Black Cherokee came from.
Yeah. Wow. That's really it's interesting to me. I'm actually half American, and my mother's family have a sort of migratory story from the South to Chicago. So from Louisiana upwards, there was a sort of whole migration there. So it's something that really intrigues me. Um, Now, obviously, we're dealing with history and identity and legacy. When writing this, what surprised you about what did you discover within the story?
Um, I think everything surprised me. Like
Mm,
there's a saying that we have in writing where people always say, write what you
mm,
know, and I always think that that's the most boring sounding thing ever because like I said, I write to discover. I
yeah.
write to learn. I like to grow. I write to grow. So, for example, there's a lot of cooking in Black Cherokee. I
Okay.
don't cook a lot. I'm a bachelor dude. I'm not really cooking a lot. I'm usually traveling. I'm on the road. But you know what? I took cooking classes so I could learn how to cook all the food.
Cool.
And so every dish that they make in Black Cherokee, and there's quite a few, I've
Mhm.
made myself at least once.
Fantastic.
Badly, mind you, but
Yeah.
I've made it. So
Fantastic.
yeah, so that's one of the things that surprised me a lot about it. I find characters are, again, with this idea of, rather than the book being about my intentions, I
Yeah.
rather see it as the book being, having ambitions of its own separate from mine. And
Hmm.
my job isn't to come up with what goes in the book. My job is to listen deeply to what the book is trying to become,
Hmm.
and capture that. And so a lot of times, so I'm always surprised because
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, look, my, like, this auntie over here keeps cussing, and I'm trying to make some Harry Potter money. I'm like, please stop cussing, like stop that. But for me, my job is to serve the book, and when the characters in the book want to do something and it feels right for them, I gotta let them have it because it's their story. It's not about me. And
Hmm.
so I'm always surprised, which is why I love writing, is
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's always a journey of surprise.
So, I mean, to me, it sounds like you're a real conduit and it's something that just comes through you. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned starting off with the imagery first, and then I am assuming, just let it go and then let it come.
Yeah, it's very much that. It's very much, I am a door through which the book walks into the world. And that's how
Mhm.
I see music as well. Like I
Yeah.
am,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm sure you've heard, because you talk to a lot of musicians, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
heard musicians
Mhm.
talk about,
Mhm.
they wrote the song in 5 minutes and it
Yeah,
seemed like,
yeah, I do it all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like you didn't even, like, there was no intentionality. There was no, like, you didn't decide anything. It just came through
Just
you
comes.
into the world,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a lot of songwriters consistently say those are the best songs they've ever written.
Yeah.
Um,
Always is. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of how I look at it, which I think is different from how writers see themselves and also from how people see writers, but I think it's more accurate for what we actually do, the process we actually do when it's
Mhm.
working. It's, you're not sort of guiding it. You're just kind of, you're very good at listening
Mm.
and allowing it to speak to you, and then translating what it's saying onto the page, which is which is great. And also you asked about the question of writing a book with mostly female voices.
Yeah.
Um, almost everyone that speaks in the book is female, from the big characters, the middle ones, even the small ones for the most
Yeah.
part. Um, and again, it's not intentional for me. It's just that that's what I I was thinking. Always you can give a very intellectual, thought out answer after the fact, but again, it's like falling in love. It's like
Mhm.
being pulled into an emotion that's more powerful than you are.
Mhm.
And so I think the book came out as a village of women
Mhm.
raising this girl to be a woman, because that's what the book and the story required.
Yeah.
And there's something about vulnerability that I think matters there. There's also something about women being the literal receptacles of history. Like, they
Mhm.
hold the next generation, and then
Absolutely.
they nurture it when it's in the world. And so
Mhm.
I think that's what the book is about. The book is about lineage and history not ever dying, and passing down the old ways to the new generation. And for me, that felt like a very uniquely female task.
Yeah.
But again, that's my slick answer after the fact.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
truth is, I did it because it felt right.
Yeah. I mean, listening to your personal story and obviously knowing how important your grandmother's relationship was in your life, maybe there's something there that there was a conduit towards that energy. Yeah.
Most definitely. I mean, I have a lot of my friends. The Bocas Literary Festival is going on in Port of Spain, Trinidad, in a few weeks. And when I go there, what I realize is that I'm very much a Caribbean writer.
Yeah.
I might write about America and live in Canada while I'm doing it, but I'm very much in the style of a lot of great Caribbean writers,
Yeah.
who have a lot of connections to the UK as well,
Hmm.
obviously. And w- a woman named Tennille Warren was interviewing me, and she said, you follow in this Caribbean tradition of Caribbean men writing in female voices. And she asked me, why do you think that was? And I'd never been asked that, so I didn't have a very good answer. But the next day, I sent her a voice note. I said, Tennille, here's what I think it is. I think a lot of Caribbean kids are raised by just the mother,
Hmm.
and for a lot of reasons. So when in that situation, your mother becomes your father and your mother. They
Yeah.
fulfill kind of so-called masculine roles and so-called feminine roles. But young men have a tendency to compete with their fathers and idolize their mothers.
Yes.
So you can imagine, when that is concentrated in one person, suddenly you have this very intense relationship that's very complex and contradictory and filled with friction, which, if you're a writer, well, that's exactly what you're going to gravitate to if you're writing about it.
Yeah. Of
Like, if
course.
whether it's a song or a novel, that's the kind of relationship you gravitate to. And so I think my impulse to write about women comes from that Caribbean tradition of male writers who have very complex relationships with the females who have raised them, because they're fulfilling sort of traditionally male and female roles simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think the primary voice, being that motherly voice, is something that infiltrates the mind and the soul from a very young age, and before you know it, it becomes the primary influence. Yeah, no, wonderful.
Yeah,
Um,
for all of us, I think that's true, right?
yeah,
Especially as men, you remember the voice of the woman that's raising you for those first,
yeah,
however long, however years.
yeah. No, I mean, it's wonderful. Um, Okay, just obviously at the moment in the news, we unfortunately are living in the wonderful world of Donald Trump, and there's obviously a lot of tension right now in the United States between conversations of history and modern identity, especially with the attempts to remove a lot of references to previous historical atrocities within, the continent of America. Um, Within that context, obviously your role as an author is extremely important. And I think that, especially with writing something like Black Cherokee, how do you feel about the importance of being able to write works like this at this moment in time?
Yeah, well, I personally feel a very heavy responsibility as a writer. I think that's why I like being a writer, because
Hmm.
these are deep conversations and deep lineages, like that we're inheriting, and I get to be part of that conversation. I get to have an oversized voice in that conversation,
Hmm.
and I take it very seriously that, oh, if you're going to have that voice, you better have something to say, and
Yeah,
you better have thought through, and you better have done the work, so that what you have to say is helping and not hindering. And of course, what's happening very much in this day and age, um, is a battle of narratives. It's a battle of, like two, we're experiencing this where two sides have declared that they won the same war. And
yeah,
how
of
is that
course.
possible?
Hmm.
So what we're experiencing is a battle of narratives. And what we know about stories is that stories shape the horizon of what we think is possible.
Hmm.
S- And you can tell a story one way or tell it another way, and that can make all the difference in how you view that story,
Yeah.
right? And I often talk about, um, my grandmother finding me behind the house talking to myself,
Hmm.
and I thought, oh, this means I'm a weird little boy. But I was practicing this little speech I'd written because I was a weird little kid. But what she did after that was, as the neighbors would walk by, she would call me from the back of the house and say, "Hey, boy, do the speech you wrote."
Cool.
And so she turned the story from "you're a weird little boy" to "you have something important people need to hear."
Hmm.
And that's a perfect example of how the exact same set of actions can be told as one story or told as another. What's happening in America, and what's always happened, is there are stories that are trying to erase the experience of Black people and Indigenous people and dark skinned people. Like, they are literally firing generals just because they're Black. They are
Yeah.
demoting generals just because they're Black. They are removing books that reference slavery from the
Hmm.
War Academy. Right now, in Annapolis, in the Naval War Academy, where they train all the officers. In that library, you can find Hitler's Mein Kampf, but you
Hmm.
cannot find any books that refer to slavery in America.
Yeah, it's absurd. Yeah.
And and so that's what's going on. But this
Mm.
is what's always been going on. It's always
Hmm.
been a battle of narrative. And I in my mind all the time, Suor, I hear a lot of people sacrifice and bled and sweat and cried so that I could be here talking to you right now.
Yeah, of
And
course. Yeah.
I don't wake up any day without hearing their voices.
Hmm.
And one of the things I think about, and in Black Cherokee, that's the vibe too, this idea of being in the river, and the river came from somewhere. It's always in front of you, but it's always around the corner where it's going as well. So
Hmm.
this idea of past, present, and future coexisting. And what I always say is, we are the ancestors, right?
Hmm.
Because the things that they did and they are no longer here to do, we're the ones that need to do it now. And one day people are going to look back at us and say, oh, Afro Soul Stories, that was telling our stories and carrying on that lineage,
Yeah.
right? And so that's how I see what I do in this moment. This why it's why I'm an artist, it's why I'm a writer, but especially in this moment,
Yeah.
I'm not it's certainly it's not even that it's not lost on me, it's that it is the purpose of why I'm writing, is
Yeah.
to win this battle of narratives that's going on.
Yes. Yeah. Of course. I mean, they always say that in any battle, the victor is the writer of the history, and I think it is very, very important at this particular moment in time, and all moments in time in the past, century, to really, really, document these ideas. Yeah, no, I was very curious to your thoughts on that. Like myself, you've lived across many cultures. So it's interesting you talk about being a traditional Trini boy.
Hmm.
How is your life? Yeah, how has the identity of living across so many cultures affected you? I can hear it in your music.
I think what it's made me is, the experience of being an immigrant means that you're always asking, well, am I Trini or am I Canadian? Am I from here or am I from there? And you always have this mixed thing, because if I go back to Trinidad, they're going to say, well, you're from foreign. But when I'm in North America, they always are like, "Oh, where are you from? You're from somewhere else." And
Yeah.
so you have this experience of being neither, but
Hmm.
being both. And I think that's really what Ophelia is going through in Black Cherokee. She's both,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And they're asking her to choose. And it's kind of like, well, I can't really choose, because I can't forget the place you learn to see the world, and in fact I cling to those because they're my roots, they're my trajectory. But also, I've lived in North America 3 times as long as I lived in Trinidad, so
Yeah.
I can't go back to Trini and walk the streets like a regular Trini anymore. So but I feel like these sort of spaces between things is normal in our lives, where
Yeah.
for me, I think there's the immigrant, are you from there or here? There's the intellectual, right? I'm a highbrow, I got a degree in English literature, so I know my Chaucer and my Shakespeare, but I want to speak to the regular person. So that sometimes contradicts. Or,
Mhm.
you know, I'm an entertainer, so sometimes I just want to make the people laugh and give them what they want. But I'm an educator, where sometimes I really want to give them what they need and get stuck in these deep ideas. And so
Yeah.
these contradictions, you get really comfortable living in a space of opposing dynamics and that you need to balance. But I think it's really special, because when you can balance them, you become a bridge from one thing to the next, so that people can suddenly understand what's on both sides of that, because you've built and you hold up this bridge they can walk on.
Yeah. I have a very similar background. My father's West African. My
Hmm.
mother's American. I grew up in the UK, and
Okay.
in recent years, I actually lived in Ghana for 15 years um,
Wow.
as an adult. Yeah, I've only just recently returned to the UK, so I've had that experience
Mm,
of
right.
going back to Ghana, not being very Ghanaian,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, sort of dealing with learning about my father's culture again, and feeling like an outsider, but then sticking with it. And then
Right.
now
Right.
returning back to the UK, starting Afro Soul Stories in order to, as you say, bridge these
Yeah.
conversations. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a special role people like us play, and
Mm,
people like Ophelia and Black Cherokee play, because
mm,
we end up being the ones that can connect people and bring people together,
yeah.
because we're fluent in both places,
Yeah. Yeah, of
right?
course.
And that's a really powerful place to be, in a world where, you know, we live in a very we all serve this god, the algorithm. It's our new
Yeah.
god, right? And and the algorithmic God does not like nuance. The algorithmic God is like, if you tell it you like Ghana, right?
Hmm. Everything you
it,
see.
everything you see will be Ghana, Ghana, Accra, Accra, Ghana, Ghana. If
Mm,
you tell it you like London, everything is going to be London. So we live in a world where people are in these little boxes of silos, and so in a world where everybody is blind, the one-eyed man is king,
mhm,
and so in a world where everyone is very segmented, um, the people that can cross between worlds and exist simultaneously in two worlds, they're the ones that hold the nuance, and they're the ones that hold the key to
mhm.
building futures between these communities.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing to hear that from someone else. um, Talk to me about your travels. Obviously, Trinidad and Canada and northern Northern America. I noticed in your music references in your music to there's a reference to Notting Hill Carnival in one song. There's a reference to Azonto and Alingo in another song, and Parachute.
Oh, snap. This man went deep. He
I
went deep.
did. I did. I was listening. I've been listening. I'm taking it in, man. Yeah, talk to me
Yeah.
about how you learnt about these references, or what did you learn about them on your travels?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're part of the same tribe, right? Because we move between these spaces, and so when you do, you start seeing patterns,
Yeah.
right? And I feel what I've seen in being able to travel, for me, sure, I'm Canadian, I'm Trinidadian, sure, but what I am my allegiance is to the Black diaspora wherever it is.
Mm,
And so I can and as a music dude, I started hearing, as I was listening to West African music and South African music, I would
mm,
hear a rhythm that was called this, but when I go and I listen to it in Kingston, Jamaica, or in Barbados, they call it some other thing, but it's the same rhythm.
it's the same
And so
thing.
I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah. And you realize, oh, these are the same people.
Yeah.
These are the remnants of the things that connected them. And, and when I grew up, we had, we throughout the Caribbean and the American diaspora, there are these religions that are West African religion
Yeah.
fused with Christianity, like
Yeah.
Santeria
Mm-hmm.
in Cuba and Candomblé and
Mm-hmm.
Voudon in
Hmm.
Haiti. Well, where I'm from, there's a thing called Shango Baptist, which is a
Okay.
fusion of Yoruba, Shango, the god of thunder and lightning, and Baptist,
Wow.
and which
Yeah.
is, and so I grew up with these remnants of connections between Africa and everywhere I go in the Caribbean and Brazil and Latin America. I was in Guadalajara, Colombia recently,
Yeah.
and
Similar.
we're the same people. It's just like
Yeah.
seeing different versions. Like, when the food develop is a little bit spiced, a little
Yeah.
different, but it's the same food.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Everyone's got
like that.
plantain.
Everybody's got plantain. Yeah, and that's what I started seeing. I started seeing patterns in the music, patterns in the language, patterns in religion, patterns in just ways of being, patterns in to the point where you could hop in the back of a taxi and someone from Africa is always like, "Yeah, where you from in Africa? You look like you're from Nigeria. You look like you're from,"
Hmm.
you know what I mean? So the people even look the same because, of
Yeah.
course, those genes are they live much longer than we do, and
Of
so
course. Yeah.
so that's where all those. I started at one point in my art. I just said, "Nah, I'm not just gonna write for." Like, you really want to have this cohesive sense of who you are, like
Mm,
something that is expansive, that connects. And so for me, I was always seeking that.
mm,
And so I evolved a way of being as an artist where what I express is what I speak is diaspora.
Yes.
What I preach is diaspora.
Mhm.
What I see and how I hear and how I translate my
Yeah.
dialect is diaspora. And so, yeah, I'm Trini and I love that. And I love being from Canada, but I consider myself a student of all the so-called Black people wherever they are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I really heard it in the music. And moving on to music,
Hmm.
I've been really enjoying it, man. I really have.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
we're cut from a similar cloth. I'm a huge fan of funk and soul. I love your synth selections. I'm a man who uses similar sounds in my music. Now, I noticed that you had an explosion of creativity from 2018 onwards. I have your discography in front of me, and yeah, that was a good year.
Yeah, well, it's always been that. It's just that I think that's when we put a lot of stuff up on the
Sure.
streaming sites.
Hmm.
But really the truth is that I mean, in the last 6 years, so from let's go to 6 years ago, COVID started.
Sure.
Pretty much this month was when everything got shut down, right?
Hmm.
So since then, I've released Saga Boy, I've released Stars in My Crown children's book. I've released
Hmm.
Black Cherokee. I
Hmm.
finished the next novel. It's literally I was
Oh,
working on
really?
it yeah, I was working on it before I talked to you, and I'm gonna go right back to it. I'm very
Fantastic.
close to the end of that.
Hmm.
But in the meantime, I released Saga King.
Hmm.
I released a series of albums in that time. I released Get Right. Those are the two that have been released, but I also made two other albums. And,
Hmm.
on Monday, I'm going to start on an acoustic soul album, which is a new vibe for me. Well, not new for me, because I'm always playing acoustic guitar in
Yeah.
private, but it's a new way of approaching. So that's 6 years, and that's probably four books and four albums. So
Well,
it's just normal for me to be always. I like to think that, when I think about Trinidad where I grew up, it's a one road village going into the jungle, and everything is just growing because it's unlimited sunshine, unlimited rainfall. So
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
just,
yeah.
it's just this fecundity, this lushness, this abundance. And the mango tree doesn't say we had mango last year, so I'm taking this year off.
Sure.
And I feel like that's how I live my life. It's always
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
like literally, I'm like, I think I'm gonna hand this novel in at the end of May. What am I working on this summer?
Sure. Yeah,
Like literally, that's my mindset. And so yeah, I think that was a really special period of creativity because that was the first time I was like, look, we're gonna really embrace this diasporic voice. We're gonna
mhm.
really explore what that means. Um, but it never stops, man. It never stops. I
Yeah,
feel like I do it because I need to, not because
yeah,
not because I want
yeah.
to, but because it's purpose.
Yeah, fantastic. So just obviously you've just given us a little exclusive there, working on your next novel. Uh, any little peeks into what that may be about, or are you holding back?
Well, I'm holding back, but let's just say things that I've already talked about what it's about in this conversation.
Right.
So
Okay.
I
Okay.
will leave that. I've dropped some big hints.
Okay. So we have our cryptic work to do, and if we're smart enough and we've paid attention, we can put it together.
Or more when it comes out next year, you're gonna go, aha.
Ah, I know about this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's really trying to um well, I will tell you this story, which is doesn't reveal much, but it does reveal a lot.
Hmm.
Black Cherokee grew out of this novel that I'm now finishing.
Right.
Uh
Okay.
I I was working on a novel and I couldn't figure it out. and I
Mhm.
decided, oh, maybe if I wrote a beginning part that's a coming of age, it'll all make
Sure.
sense. And
Yeah.
then my editor was like,
Yeah.
editors, they're very nice. They're firm, but they're nice people. And so sometimes you have to translate what they're saying. And the translation was this. You seem to be writing two books that have nothing to do with each other at the same time. Let me suggest you write one book at a time. And so so the second part that I wrote, I focused on that. That became Black Cherokee.
Right.
And now
Okay.
I've gone back to the original book that I was writing.
Right.
And thankfully it's sorted itself out. And
Yeah. Yeah. You
so
managed to.
yeah, I managed to, yeah, but I see them as non-identical twins. Like they really have nothing to do with each other.
Mm.
But if you read both of them, you can feel some vibes that are you can feel similar vibes.
Yeah, very cool. Oh, I look forward to finding out what comes next. It's amazing how much that you've done over the past. I'm going to say decade, but I'm sure it's been longer. Um, where do you see yourself? What's in the future besides obviously new works and new music? Yeah, what's in the immediate future after that?
Well, I mean, the new thing for me is broadcasting, working with
Hmm.
the CBC, which is kind of
Yeah.
Canada's BBC.
Hmm.
Um, and doing the podcast the next chapter,
Hmm.
it's kind of it's exposed me to a lot of ways of telling stories that I typically
Of
would
course.
not have read.
Yeah.
um and that's been a great education that I'm thankful for. But also, like what we were saying earlier, like this idea of a lot of false narratives and
Hmm.
the algorithm being a distorter of reality. Um i'm starting to see reading as the fundamental act of resistance,
Yes.
because it is fundamentally filled with empathy, because you have to put yourself in someone else's mind for a
Mhm.
period of time. It is off screen. It builds concentration because you
Mhm.
have to keep track of things in
Mhm.
your head rather
Yeah.
than in. And so there's a lot about reading. And so I feel like the work, there's a deeper work around storytelling and reading and engaging with stories and how that impacts us, that I think is going to deepen the work that I'm already doing in terms of music, telling stories in songs, telling stories in novels, telling stories in the memoir. I think there's some deeper connections that are going to come free there as I explore not only my stories, but the way just stories are being told in general.
Mhm.
Um, and so I don't know what that means yet, but
Yeah.
that's where I feel the most energy is just about it's about helping, is first of all getting as many people into telling stories, telling their own stories, understanding each other's stories, but also just the concept that that stories are this very potent, elegant means of resistance and thriving in our lives. And just by virtue of participating in this ancient technology of storytelling, we activate so many vital parts of ourselves, and parts of ourselves that I would say are under attack, um, cognitively, daily. They are under attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not I'm a firm believer in joy as being the number one means. Like, joy is the most political thing. Joy is the most future building thing. Joy is
Mhm.
the biggest resistance. I'm a Trini, right? Like, if you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
Trinis,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
wanna we we wanna lime, we wanna fat, you know, we like a little rum, but
Yeah.
we're serious people. But I think, any soca song will tell you, any good one anyway, the joy is almost the methodology of
Hmm.
how we express resistance,
Sure.
and that we're here and that we're living and we're thriving and we're doing
Yeah.
it, and we're hopeful. We're not going to sit
Hmm.
here and feel bad about what's happening,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's lots to feel bad about, but we're not going to do that. We're going to use joy as an engine to build our future. And so that's where my mind is always at.
Yeah, yeah, very cool, man. Um, yeah, that sort of segues nicely onto what do how does expressing yourself through music as John Orpheus differ from writing? Because it so obviously does, and I think you just alluded to it there, yeah. Because your music is very visual. Lyrically, you are definitely from Trini,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
musically,
yeah, I think there's some I think I'm approaching a reason why I wanted to strip down the music to the acoustic guitar is because I feel like, first of all, the acoustic guitar, every culture has that instrument, right? Every culture has a piece of wood with some string on it that you can strum. Every culture, doesn't matter, Asia, Africa, wherever. And so there's a universality of it. And I think there's a potency about reducing everything down to voice and strings.
Mhm,
And I think lyrically, where I'm going to go, where I want to go, is I detect that there's I think about my song Fella Awoke,
mhm,
which is a perfect sort of diasporic
yeah,
um engine, because I'm connecting my life and my grandmother with Bob
mhm,
Marley and
mhm,
the woman in his life, and Fela's grandmother. Um and that those relationships, so I'm connecting those things, and I feel like that's the kind of storytelling that I'm going into. And
mhm,
that's a hard one for me. It's a real struggle, to be honest, Sior, because
mhm,
you've listened to the music, so you
mhm,
understand. There's a part of me, a very Trini part, that is very much, we entertaining, we having fun, everything is good, everything is party. But there's a really serious side that I feel like I've often avoided going to, because it's
sure,
almost
yeah,
like it's
too real.
no one wants to hear that. It's too real. Everybody
Mhm,
already knows. It's too serious. And so I think in both my writing and my music, I am at a point where I'm embracing myself as someone who teaches through
mhm,
stories,
mhm, yeah,
which is a role that in African diaspora communities, there's always someone who
of
fulfills
course.
that role as an oral
The griot, yeah.
storyteller, as a griot. And yes, so I feel like that's where I'm at with all the work I'm doing now. It's that I'm embracing this kind of like less of the entertainer and more of the
Mhm,
educator. It's still going to be it's still entertainment, but it's
sure,
entertainment that leaves you with thoughts and leaves you and moves you in profound ways, and allows a space where you can engage with deeper parts of yourself.
yeah,
Um, that's kind of the space that I'm entering. It's still storytelling. Like, to me, it's always storytelling. There's always characters. There's
mhm,
always people wrestling with things. There's always people trying to become things. There's
mhm,
always people falling in love with things. I don't think that changes, but I think there's room for me to connect some of these, like a lot of the ideas I've talked about with you today.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind of like my doctrine. That's my doctrine of existing. And so I want to
yeah,
write songs that connect all of that.
very cool. Have you ever heard of an artist called Terry Callier?
No, Terry, how do you spell
Oh,
the name?
okay, Terry Callier, Callier spelled Callier. There's an album called Timepiece. I highly
Uh-huh.
recommend listening to his album
Okay,
Timepiece.
yes,
But
yes.
him in general. Now, his story was he was a folk artist in America in the 60s and 70s
Hmm.
on that whole scene. And then he had a daughter, and he ended up becoming like a computer engineer for like 20 years, and he stopped
Wow.
music. And then he came back to music at a later age and wrote Timepiece, which is an absolute masterpiece. But lyrically and
Love it.
musically, I think you'll really connect to that. And it very much in the same approach as everything you've just said. Narratives that are very much. I think the simplicity. Well, the music is very intricate, but the approach of the acoustic being the conduit for that. Yeah, yeah. No, I think you'll really
Hmm.
enjoy that. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Beautiful. I got it teed up. I'm gonna check it
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think you'll dig it.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So musically, man, I've really enjoyed all the music. I really have. As I said, I know you're wearing a Grace Jones t-shirt today, which Island
I
Life is
am,
my
yes,
one of my favorite
indeed.
albums in the world. And I know the imagery as well in your album covers and everything. That's hence my desire to talk about some Rick James.
Hmm. Yeah, let's go there. I mean, Rick James. So, for me, Rick James was special because there's a part, and I write about this in Saga Boy in my memoir. There's a
Mhm.
point where I had heard about, like, my dad comes to Canada the year I was born. So
Right.
I don't really meet my dad. I'm not in the same room as him, not
Mm.
consciously, till I'm 12, till I'm
Yep.
11 actually years old. But the whole time I'm hearing about my brothers, his sons in Canada. And there's a time where I, as a teen, move in with my stepmom and my two brothers on my dad's side, who I've heard about since I was a kid, but I don't really know.
Mhm.
And my dad is nowhere to be found. But you know what he left? He left all his tapes from the 70s and early 80s.
Mhm.
Um, in the basement. And so we would go down and listen to them and dance to them, and like we would have a great time. Like that's some of the best times me and my two brothers, Adrian and Nigel, bonding. But in
Mhm.
hindsight, and I reflect on this in Sagaboy, it was like we were hanging out with our dad because that was our only way of spending time with him.
Mm.
And everyone had their favorites. Adrian was Marvin Gaye, Nigel was Barry White, but we loved all of them. But I really loved Rick James a lot.
Yeah. Mhm.
And when I talked to my dad, he says those were his favorites. I said, if we go back to 79 and you're in the Cadillac Sedan DeVille, forest green interior, and you're rolling, what are you listening to? He goes, it's gotta be Rick James. It's
Rick
gotta be Rick
James.
James. And Rick James, of course, is a Canadian. Rick James has
I didn't
huge
know that.
Canadian roots. Yeah,
I
Rick
didn't know
James
that.
grew up on the prairies. He
Right.
played in a band with Neil Young in Toronto,
I didn't know
and
that at all.
even when he blew up in Buffalo, which is just across the border from Canada.
Oh, I didn't know
So
that.
yeah, so Rick James has a lot of I know quite a few people that went to high school with Rick James,
Cool.
played with Rick James, hung with him. I know at least one person who suspects Rick James might be their daddy. I'm not gonna name names, but she looks like him, so I'm not but her mom was a girlfriend of Rick James.
Wow.
So Rick James has been part of my life in a really actual factual way forever, but you know the music was always special to me. There was always something raw and vital about his music. I'm a bass player who sings as well, so I really like I could really get into his songs from
Yeah.
a like put it together and play the bass. Like I understood his concept of what he was doing.
Mm.
Um and the big thing for me was that I was always I was never Rick James. What's interesting about him is he's just as much a rock band as he is a funk band.
Yeah. Very
Like
much so.
I think it's very understated how bands like Cameo or
Yep.
Controversy era Prince, if you see the
Mhm.
footage of that tour,
Yeah.
they're a rock band.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
very
And
much so.
and
Mhm.
and you know, and so I was always into that because I was a rock kid. I used to listen to rock, but want to make my rock black.
Mhm.
And because of that, I would look to people like Rick James and Sly and the Family Stone,
Just,
Living Color,
mhm.
obviously Prince. Like I was like because people would always say, well, you're black, you're not supposed to be wearing leather and playing that rock music. And I would be like, I
Mm-mm.
mean, I'm pretty sure black people invented that, but but I was but I had these real examples of people who were doing it, and Rick James was my ultimate favorite because I felt like he had rock attitude, but the sound was
Very
so
much.
funky. The sound
Yeah,
was so funky, and
yeah.
in some of those songs, it's like, I respect Prince more than Rick James. Like, I think Prince, what he's done is, he's Prince. But
Mhm.
if you ask, if, but I'm quicker to put on some Rick James than I am to put on Prince on my record player, to be real about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just connect with him spiritually. And all the Chappelle show stuff aside, which is, I think it's funny and it's fun and I love it, but also respect that man as one of the greatest musicians ever.
Musically fantastic. Yeah, infectious music. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Very, very, very important.
absolutely. Yeah.
Now, your life now is broadcasting, as you mentioned before. And how has moving into hosting the next chapter been for you? And yeah, how's that?
Yeah, it's a learning curve. As you know, it's an art. It's conversation as art.
Hmm.
Um, which is actually a very natural thing for me. I feel like, hosting the next chapter, sometimes in your life you don't know you're going somewhere, and but when you get there you realize you've been headed there the whole time.
Sure. Yeah.
And and so hosting the next chapters brought together, I've never done broadcasting before, but it's brought together several streams of things that I've done a lot of. So
Mm.
number one, I have a degree in English literature, and so reading and breaking down books and thinking about literature and critically is my bag. Number two, I'm publishing books, obviously, and so understanding that world and knowing that world is really helpful. And number three, I've spent most of my life on mics and in studios performing with my voice. And so there's a kind of oh yeah, it's new, but it's really not new because
Yeah.
it's just a new application of something that I'm very familiar with. And
Yeah.
then the rest is just, just there's an art because, it's not, as someone being interviewed, it's about me and what I think. But,
Mhm.
as someone interviewing, it's not, it's the opposite. My job
Yeah.
is to just ask great questions and get the hell out of the way and follow the thread and, and just make people comfortable. Like, you're very much, when you say host, that word is very much, I think of it like I'm having a party over at my place and I've invited somebody as a guest of honor, and because they got something cool going on, and we're just gonna sit and talk about it. But I've got a bunch of my friends over as well, and they
Yeah.
gonna chime in, and
Mhm.
we're gonna bring them into this conversation. And
Mhm.
it's really helped me to take that word host literally.
Very
Like,
cool. Mhm.
don't do anything you wouldn't do if you were bringing someone to your house, and do the things you would do if you're bringing someone over to your house to host them. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's been fun. I love it because I love meeting people. Not every book that we cover is a favorite, but every
Sure, of course.
writer, I'm so interested in every single writer, though. I love
Mm.
hearing about their process, their intention. Even if I don't love what something they are into, I'm really curious about why they love what they're into. And
Mhm.
that curiosity is, man, it gets fed, and the more they feed it, the more curious, the bigger it gets.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic.
Mm.
Well, I mean, I cannot wait to hear what comes next, and I must thank you very very much for joining us today. Um, Thank you so much. Yeah, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, just thank you for what you're doing. I've really, I think we're kindreds. I think we're those bridge builders.
Yeah.
I certainly in the musical in sense, I feel like we could have a whole conversation just
Oh,
about that.
totally.
Um, but but yeah, thank you for what you're doing. I'm like, I get to be a guest on a lot of podcasts and platforms, but I can honestly say you've become one of my favorites just
Oh, thank you so
prepping to
much.
be here today. So thank you for what you do and thanks for having me. I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Well, I wish you the best. We've had a very sunny day here in London. It is now the evening, so I'm going to
Yes, sir.
continue my evening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Are you in Toronto?
I'm just outside Toronto. Yes.
Okay. It looks sunny.
Yeah, it is very sunny. I'm gonna go for I've got some more book work. I'm just finishing a chapter and then I'm
Hmm.
gonna go for a run in the woods. I think it's gonna be a
Nice.
beautiful day. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
All
Well,
the
thank you
best,
so
sir.
so much. Thank you so much. Have a
Yeah.
lovely afternoon.
Take
Cheers,
care. We'll
cheers.
stay in touch.